Yeah, well, I know he gonna be there.
All right, let me start this. Htp family, you're tuning into the pro-black perspective on KWAZ Radio. We're doing a deep reading of the Wretched of the Earth today. This is part 7 of 20. This is how we're going to experience Black August. Although, I want to tell you guys, I actually did record a Garvey interview, and that's going to be like the icing on the cake. Or, I mean, yeah, it's going to be the icing on the cake. So make sure you check that out. It's going to be on I'm a Bookman's channel, though. So
Dairy free.
Make sure you subscribe. You said what?
It's the ice and dairy free.
Ice and dairy free.
I said it's the icing dairy free.
Nah. This is that whole milk. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, cream.
Yeah, it's that cream. It's like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like you know, you go to the vegan store, and you're like, oh, that tastes kind of like what I rememred, and then you get that, you get the icing. You know what I'm saying? Like this is that. Oh damn, you know, like you know, like slap your family kind of good ice cream. So yeah, it's gonna be that one. Anyway, for those of you who might not know her channel, it's Ile Echo Omoluwabi. So definitely check that out. But also check out the rest of the KWAZ family, or check out the KWAZ family, which is Bitter Medicine Podcast, Revolutionary Matron, Harsh Reality Podcast, and of course, the Pro-Black Perspective, which you're listening to right now. All right, we're going to jump into this reading. It is on page 72. Right? It says the temptation. Oh, let me actually share it on the Discord. So those of you who might want to, add your 2 cents or even more, I have a Cash App for that. No, but otherwise, you can come onto this Discord, join the voice channel called the Pro-Black Perspective, Pro-Black Broadcast, Pro-Black Perspective Podcast, and there you could see the reading and you could give your feedback live. Just try not to say anything, that would get me too canceled, But all right. The temptation is great, therefore, to crush this body by centralizing the administration and keeping a firm control over the people. This is all right. So basically, just to give you context, this is how, just the context of it is that he's talking about how after the revolution. So you talk about revolution. Okay, you won. You decolonized. You no longer have that. You never long have the colonizers there. Now you got to run yourself. What do you do next? And Fanon is saying the temptation is great to crush this body, which is the native government. Not the native government, the chiefs and so on and so forth. To crush the chiefs and centralize the administration and keep a firm control over the people. Basically, you kind of hear, yeah, maybe some dictatorship is going to come about, right? So this is one of the reasons why we often hear that the underdeveloped countries need a dose of dictatorship. The leaders distrust the rural masses. This distrust, moreover, can take on serious proportions. Such is the case for certain governments that, long after national independence, consider the interior as an unpacified region where the head of state and his ministers only venture during army maneuvers. The interior is considered a virtual terra incognita. Paradoxically, the national government's attitude toward the rural masses is reminiscent in some ways of the colonial power. We are not too sure how the masses will react. We need to use the lash if we want to take this country out of the dark ages. The young leaders are not afraid to say, but as we have seen, the political party's disregard for the rural masses during the colonial period can only be prejudicial to national unity and to settling rapidly the nation in motion. So again, there's this one of the things with colonization is you have to understand what colonization is. Colonization is you set up a colony. That is that you set up cities in a rural area. When you set up these cities in this rural area, you begin to take people from the rural area to supply your cities because your city is empty when you just set up a colony. Now, after decolonization, you still have these cities and you still have these rural area. The only thing is that now, having the whole of the nation, you have that responsibility in place of these black people who do not have the international connections that you would have if you were an international traveler setting up a colony, right? They don't have this connection, but they want to expand the township. They want to expand the wealth that's coming into them. They want to facilitate a transformation and a defense against those international foreigners. This in itself demands some sort of action from the urbanites on the ruralites. And there's this distrust of the ruralites because one of the things that the ruralites, because what decolonization means for somebody who's urban versus what decolonization means for somebody who's rural, is the rural person says, oh, well, decolonization, yes, that means now we can go back to the way things were, you know? And the urbanite says, now that it's decolonized, we can go towards where our country could have went if people were not sabotaging us. Right? But it's a whole different historical narrative. One's history is based in the local area of Africa, and the other one is based kind of in Europe. But we kind of don't see it, you know? And because we don't see it, we are, you know, there's bound to be a clash. And the winner is probably going to be the urban city. Because they have better weapons. So sometimes colonialism endeavors to diversify and dislocate the nationalist upsurge. Instead of stirring up the sheikhs and the chiefs against the revolutionaries in the towns, the native bureaus organized the tribes and religious brotherhoods into parties. Confronted with an urban party which is beginning to embody the will of the nation and constitute a threat to the colonial regime, factions are born and sympathies and parties based on tribe and region emerge. The entire tribe is transformed into a political party in close consultation with the colonialists. Roundtable discussions can now begin. The Party of National Unity is swamped by the very number of political factions. The tribal parties oppose centralization and unity and denounce the one-party dictatorship. So obviously we can talk about, you know, the country that we always talk about. All right, let's not even. Well, I mean, it's a no-brainer. But actually, I guess some people say, because sometimes right now I'm seeing a lot of dialogue concerning like who will be West Africa's, which nation will be West Africa's, you know, look at that country, you know, and the rivalry.
We already know.
The rivalry is between Nigeria and Ghana. You know, like the Jollof, it's a Jollof rice rivalry, right? Once they were talking about.
Senegal has entered the chat.
You said what?
Senegal has entered the chat.
Senegal. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, you know. They made it. All right, but anyway, so the thing is that right now, like Ghana would have that one-party dictatorship. Ghana would have that national party, that large, powerful national party. But what happened in Nigeria was that it had those regional tribal parties, you know? So you have the Yoruba. In their area, you have the Fulani in their area, and you have the Igbo in another area. And they form prominent parties to the point where there is this sort of ethnic conflict, ethnic tension that really weakens the idea of a national party, you know, Nigeria First Party. There's actually I saw a quote from the current leader of the current president of Nigeria, who is Buhari, who a lot of people who aren't Fulani don't like, right? But he said he doesn't care about, I believe it was either the Igbo or the Yoruba, he doesn't care about something that happened with them because he said they didn't vote for me, you know? And that kind of extremism, that extreme partyism, we see that in America. You know, we see the Republic, you know, the Trump, you know, when Donald Trump was president, it was like, I don't care about these other people. They didn't vote for me. Like, I don't really care for black folks. They didn't really vote for me. I don't care for these Democrats. They didn't really vote for me. However, when it came to, and then when the Democrats say something like, oh, well, we just want to be in the middle, we just want us on and so forth, the Democrats kind of represent what would be the national party versus the tribal party in America. And that's actually a really interesting example because because again, like I said, for Ghana, you would see that they probably do have a few tribal parties, but there really is like a one-party system, maybe 1 to 2 party system. You know, Nkrumah pointed out that America has a one-party system as well. It's just that in usual American extravagance, it has 2 of them. You know, but this is what Fanon is documenting as these are examples of how colonialists try to sabotage the one-party system or the political system of decolonized Africa or decolonizing Africa. He tries to sabotage it by lifting up other groups. And a lot of people will tell you that it turns out that possibly, or some people are under the suspicion that in Nigeria, the British did support the Fulani and did support Fulani rule or Fulanis into a position mostly to destabilize, possibly to destabilize the country. Now, Is the solution then to just give in to this destabilization, to give in to this split? Some people believe so. Is a solution to have a powerful national party that doesn't look at ethnic groups? Some people believe so. It's upon us to, follow whatever conviction we may have and see it through. That's what it comes to. And of course, if we have any new information or any new opportunities, we should go ahead and take those. But otherwise, later on, the same tactics will be used by the national opposition. The occupiers has already made his choice from the 2 or 3 nationalist parties who led the liberation struggle. The method of choice is typical. Once a party has achieved national unanimity and has emerged as the sole negotiator, the occupier begins his maneuvering and delays negotiations as long as possible. The delay is used to whittle away the party's demands and obtain concessions from the leadership to remove certain extremist elements. So again, if you're trying to negotiate something, you want to negotiate something that's palatable or more palatable than what is extreme. You want, and this is like the real world. Real world is, as I outlined yesterday, real world is you invest somewhere, right? You want that investment protected. You want guarantees on the protection of that investment. You do not want to lose your investment because the people are sloppy with it. That's what these white people are doing. That white people are moving, if they have capital in your country, right? If they have capital, or even like the Chinese, they have capital in your country, they want it done right. They want it done specifically, and they don't want anybody among you sabotaging them. So extremists might be like, oh, well, we don't want these Chinese. Oh, we don't want these British. Oh, we don't want the French. And they don't want that element to have that much prominence because, as we saw, for instance, in South Africa, you can burn buildings and bomb buildings and so on and so forth. And if there's no repercussions from the nation, nobody wants to invest there. It's like when black people were rioting in New York, not New York, in America, a lot of times if you burn a building, if you burn somebody's business, they do not want to come back and set up that business the same place. Not without certain assurances that, no, the community is under control. And that's what colonialism and decolonization looks like, is that they want assurances that the community is under control. The extremist element would be, get rid of all of that. But again, there's reasons why people don't particularly like that outcome, because when you're without anything, when your town looks like a war zone, because nobody's building the houses back, because just because you burned them and you felt outraged at that moment, doesn't mean someone's going to come back and be like, yeah, let me rebuild your house. It's going to cost them money. And if they're not going to get that money back, then no, they're not going to do it. Or they're going to cost them money, resources, time, that kind of stuff. And there's like better options. There's better opportunities. There's quote unquote better areas, But anyway, if, however, no single party emerges, the occupier is content to favor the one which seems to him to be the most reasonable. You see what I'm saying? The Nationalist Party, which were excluded from the negotiations, then loudly denounced the agreement concluded between the other party and the occupier. The party which takes over power from the occupier, conscious of the danger of the rival party's vague, strictly demagogic position, endeavors to dismantle and outlaw it. The persecuted party has no other alternative but to take refuge on the periphery of the towns and in the interior. It attempts to stir up the rural masses against the mercenaries of the coast and the corrupt elements in the capital. Any excuse is good enough, from religious arguments to the tradition-breaking innovations introduced by the new national authority. It exploits the obscurantist tendencies of the rural masses. Its so-called revolutionary doctrine is in fact based on the reactionary, heated, and spontaneous nature of the peasantry. It spreads the rumor here and there that the mountainous regions of the interior are on the move, and there is discontent among the peasants. It claims that in one region the police have opened fire on the peasants. Reinforcement has been dispatched and the government is about to collapse. With no clear program and no other objective but to take over from the team in power, the opposition party puts their fate in the hands of the spontaneous and obscure mass of the peasantry. So here he's outlining some imaginary, some situation where, like his imagination is kind of active, but he's just saying that, this is how you if the occupier were to work with a party that wasn't necessarily about nationalism, then the nationalists would then flee into the rural area and try to stoke a rural revolution, right? Conversely, and of course, rural revolution is something that's real. Maoism is based off of rural revolution. Marxism is technically urban revolution. Leninism is kind of a mixture, but Maoism is about the peasants uprising. But anyway, conversely, in some cases, the opposition no longer seeks support from the rural masses, but from the progressive elements of the young nation's labor unions. In this case, the government calls upon the masses to resist the workers' demands, calling them rash, anti-traditionalist maneuverings. The observations we have noted concerning the political parties can now be applied to the labor unions mutatis mutandis. The first labor unions in the colonial territories are usually local branches of their metropolitan counterparts, and their slogans echo those of the metropolis. Once the crucial phase of the liberation struggle begins to take shape, a group of indigenous union leaders decide to create a national labor movement. The locals desert en masse the previous organization. Hold on a second. So Bit of Medicine Podcast says, peace, family. Evolutionary Matron says, greetings, fam. Greetings, sister. How you doing? And of course, peace, Bit of Medicine. Once the crucial phase of the liberation struggle begins to take shape, a group of indigenous union leaders decides to create a national labor movement. The locals desert en masse the previous organization imported from the metropolis. The formation of the union is another way for the urban population to exert pressure on the colonial authorities. We have already said that the proletariat in the colonies is embryonic and represents the most privileged fraction of the population. The national labor unions born out of the liberation struggle are urban organizations, and their program is above all political and nationalist. But this national union, born during the decisive phase of the fight for independence, is in fact the legal enlistment of dynamic, politically conscious nationalist elements. So let's just actually understand this. Once the crucial phase of the liberation begins to take shape, the union leaders decide to create a national labor movement, right? The locals desert the previous organization. And so you want the urban population to exert pressure on so he's going back in time to when the liberation struggle is starting, so he jumps from the post-revolution to this part. We've already said that the proletariat in the colonies is embryonic and represents the most privileged. So the national labor unions born of the liberation struggle are urban. Born during the decisive phase of the fight for independence is in fact the legal enlistment of dynamic, politically conscious. So the independence. So he's like, independence is depending on if you're like in the township, if you're urban area, the labor unions, that it's kind of a nicely political people. And then he's going to contrast it with the ruralites, I guess. So the rural masses, despised by the political parties, continue to be kept on the sidelines. There is, of course, an agricultural workers' unions, but such a formation is content to satisfy the formal needs for a united front against colonialism. Right? So obviously, and that's actually what you should do. You should have a united front against colonialism. You shouldn't have separate interests just because of the job you have. You should be against this foreigner. So the union leaders who began their careers in the context of the metropolitan unions are at a loss when it comes to organizing the rural masses. They have lost touch with the peasantry and are mainly concerned with enlisting steel workers, dockers, civil servants in the utility sector, etc. During the colonial phase, the nationalist labor unions, and this is what's interesting about socialism, is that it's trying to promote among people that based off of your occupation, that's whether or not you should be politicized. And the thing is that if you were having a clear nationalist, contention that no, you should be politicized based off of your race and the fact that you want to be, your own rulers, then you don't adopt that view. You don't adopt that view. But anyway, so during the colonial phase, the nationalist labor union represent a spectacular strike force. In the towns, these unions can paralyze or at least disrupt at any moment the colonialist economy. The labor unions, Since the European settlements are mostly confined to the towns, the psychological repercussions are considerable. No gas, no electricity, no garbage pickup, and produce lies riding on the wars. So, he's saying if the unions were to do a proper strike, right, in a colony, in a colonial situation, they could stop garbage pickup, gas, electricity, so on and so forth. These metropolitan enclaves, which the towns represent in the colonial context, are profoundly affected by this labor unrest. The stronghold of colonialism, the capital, has difficulty withstanding such a battering, but the rural masses of the interior remain unaffected by this confrontation. There is, therefore, a clear disproportion from the national point of view between the importance of the labor unions and the rest of the nation. After independence, the workers enlisted in the union have the impression of running on empty. Once the limiting objectives they set themselves have been achieved, they prove to be extremely precarious given the huge task of nation building. See, that's what I'm saying. You have to really prepare yourself for nation building. That's something that we don't really do. And because we don't do it, that's partly why a lot of our problems are where they are as they are. So faced with the national bourgeoisie, whose relations with the government are often very close, the union leaders discover they can no longer confine themselves to labor disputes. Congenitally isolated from the rural masses and capable of extending their influence beyond the urban periphery, the unions adopt an increasingly political stance. In fact, they become political candidates. They endeavor by every means possible to drive the bourgeoisie into a corner. Protests are made against keeping foreign bases on national soil. Commercial deals are exposed, and criticism is voiced against the national government's foreign policy. The workers, now independent, are getting nowhere. The unions realize in the aftermath of independence that if their social demands were to be expressed, they would scandalize the rest of the nation. The workers are in fact pampered by the regime. They represent the most well-to-do fraction of the people. Any unrest aimed at winning improved living standards for the laborers and dock workers would not only be unpopular, but might very well stir up the hostility of the disinherited rural population. The unions, banned from union activity, make no headway. So again, he's saying after nation building is done, after you have this independence, now what the labor unions want is to be better paid, you know? And this doesn't benefit the nation anymore, you know? Like, they already were doing well. They already had some nice jobs. There were steel workers, dock workers, so on and so forth. Now it's like, hey, okay, you want to be better paid. And here's the important thing, too. I want people to really get this because it's really complicated. The colony system is very, like, depending on where you're standing. If you're just in the, you know, like right outside of the colonized town, you're saying, oh, wow, there's a lot going on. But when you get towards the top, you realize that the colonial system is attached to a global economy. And the wealth is coming from the global economy. And once you lose that global economy, you no longer have that wealth, you know? So, yeah, sure, you could get paid more under their system, but then after you get out their system, which is what you want, like, you suddenly have to fight for yourself, which is unusual. Not unusual, but you're not used to it, right? It's the normal thing to do, but we are not used to it. Melanin 100% gives me a black power fist, a crown, and 2 hearts. Peace. How are you doing? Yeah, I saw it yesterday.
How are you?
What? Oh, you? Oh, he's crazy. Anyway, but yeah. So yeah, I saw yesterday. You said Hotep, or you said peace, and I didn't get to see it after the podcast ended. So thanks for showing up again. So the malaise conveys the objective need for a social program which at long last concerns the entire nation. The union suddenly discovered that the interior must also be enlightened and organized, but since they never bothered to establish working links between their organization and the peasantry, who represent the only spontaneously revolutionary force in the country, the unions proved to be ineffective and realized the anachronistic nature of their program. The union leaders, immersed in a worker-controlled politics, inevitably reached the preparatory stage for a coup d'etat. But here again, the interior is excluded. It is a showdown restricted to the national bourgeoisie and the unionized workers' movement. The national bourgeoisie, appropriating the old traditions of colonialism, flexes its military and police muscle, whereas the union organized meetings and mobilized tens of thousands of their members. The peasants shrug their shoulders as they muse over this national bourgeoisie and the workers, who after all have enough to eat. The peasants shrug their shoulders, for they realize that both parties treat them as a makeshift force. The unions, the parties, and the government, in a kind of immoral Machiavellianism, use the peasant masses as a blind, inert force of intervention, as a kind of brute force. So he's saying that there's a showdown. So basically, when you subscribe to the socialist idea, you subscribe to the showdown between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And when you do that, you leave out everybody who isn't a proletariat or bourgeoisie, you know. And like I said, that leaves out the petty bourgeoisie as well as the as well as the peasantry. The peasantry are not even in the same economic system. In a sense that you say to yourself, okay, all the garbage collectors, all the engineers, or not engineers, but all the people keeping the lights on, all that kind of stuff, they're going to stop working so that, you know, the whole colonial system is going to be shut down. And that's fine. But if you're in a village outside of the town, you don't even notice. You know, all the lights are off in the city. That means nothing when you're not in the city. You know, what Fanon is saying as well is that now the bourgeoisie, however, are going to use the peasants against the workers. You know, the unionized workers. So he says, in certain circumstances, however, the peasants' masses make a crucial contribution to the struggle for national liberation, as well as the course of action opted for the future nation. For the undeveloped countries, this phenomenon is of fundamental importance, and this is the reason why we propose to study it in detail. We have seen that the nationalist party's will to smash colonialism works hand in hand with the will to remain on good terms with the colonial authorities. Interesting. So he says the nationalist party's will to smash colonialism works hand in hand with the will to remain on good terms with the colonial authorities. That's problematic, obviously. You know, I know people say, you know, you shouldn't trust people who say problematic, but but I mean to say that, you know, people want to keep good terms with like they're not burning their bridges. You're not burning your bridges, and because you're not burning your bridges, that's partly why we have neocolonialism. You know, we're saying France, we want the French people out, but we still want to work with France. You know, and it's backwards, and it's part of the reason why Africa remains pretty stagnant. In fact, one of the things that people know, and like we all kind of figured, is that a lot of African countries have after decolonization, after independence, their economies went down, you know, and there's good reason for that. But part of it is that you're trying to be on good terms with the colonial authorities, who, if nothing else, want you to call them back, you know, and so they'll sabotage you because you didn't get rid of the problem. The problem was the colonials all along, or working with the colonials all along. So within these parties, two lines of actions can emerge. First of all, some of the intellectual elements who have made a thorough analysis of the colonial reality and the international situation begin to criticize the ideological vacuum of the Nationalist Party and its dearth of strategy and tactics. They never tire of asking the leader the crucial questions: what is nationalism? What does it mean to you? What does the term signify? What is the point of independence? And first, how do you intend to achieve it? While at the same time demanding the methodological issues be rigorously addressed. To electioneering methods, they suggest adding any other means. And the first sign of a skirmish, the leaders are quick to call them juvenile hotheads. But because these demands are neither juvenile nor hot-headed, the revolutionary elements articulating them are rapidly isolated and removed. The leaders, cloaked in their experience, ruthlessly reject these upstarts, these anarchists. The party machine tends to resist any innovation. The revolutionary minority finds itself isolated, confronted by a leadership, frightened and anguished at the idea it could be swept away in a whirlwind whose nature, strength, and direction are beyond its imagining. The second line of action involves the senior or junior cadres whose activities have been the object of a colonialist police persecution. It is worth noting that these men attained the leadership of the party through sheer hard work, self-sacrifice, and exemplary patriotism. These men from the rank and file are often laborers, seasonal workers, and sometimes even genuinely unemployed. For them, being activists in a nationalist party is not a question of politics, but the only way of casting off their animal status for a human one. These men, uncomfortable with the party's exacerbated legalism, demonstrate within the limits of their assigned activities a spirit of initiative, courage, and a sense of purpose which almost systematically makes them targets for the forces of colonialist repression. Arrested, convicted, tortured, and amnestied, they use this period of detention to compare ideas and harden their determination. Strengthened by the ordeal of hunger strikes and brutal solidarity of the prisons, they are little better than the communal graveyards. They live out their liberation as a God-sent opportunity to launch the armed struggle. Meanwhile, outside, the colonial authorities, besieged now from all sides, are making overtures to the nationalist moderates. So again, there's this revolutionary cadre that's the one that's being colonially repressed, and it goes back to, actually, Revolutionary Matron pointed out how, Dr. King exists in the context of Malcolm X. How Dr. King is the one that the colonials will make the overtures to, because Malcolm X is threatening to do other things otherwise. So that's just one of those concepts, just repeated and repeated throughout Africa. The nationalist moderates. That would be the Dr. King. So what we see therefore is a splintering close to breaking point between the official and the unofficial party factions. The unofficial elements are made to feel undesirable and are shunned. The unofficial, of course, being the revolutionaries, right? They're the ones who are about armed struggle. The legal factions come to their aid, but taking so many precautions that the unofficial factions already feel themselves to be outsiders. These men then make contact with the intellectual elements whose position they admired a few years previously. The encounter leads to the formation of an underground party, parallel to the official party, but the repression of these irredeemable elements intensifies as the official party draws closer to colonialism and attempts to change it from the inside. The unofficial faction then finds itself in a historical dead end. Driven from the towns, these men first of all take refuge in the urban periphery, but the police network smokes them out and forces them to leave the towns for good and abandon the arena of political struggle. They retreat to the interior, the mountains, and deep into the rural masses. Initially, the masses close in around them, protecting them from the manhunt. The nationalist militant who decides to put his fate in the hands of the peasant masses instead of playing hide and seek with the police in the urban centers will never regret it. The peasant cloak wraps him in a mantle of unimagined tenderness and vitality. Veritable exiles in their own country and severed from the urban milieu where they drew up the concepts of nation and political struggle, they take to the maquis, constantly forced to remain on the move to elude the police, walking by night so as not to attract attention. They're able to travel the length and breadth of their country and get to know it. Gone are the cafes, the discussions about the coming elections, or the cruelty of such and such a police officer. Their ears hear the true voice of the country, and their eyes see the great and infinite misery of the people. They realize that precious time has been wasted on futile discussion about the colonial regime. They realize at last that change does not mean reform, that change does not mean improvement. Now possessed with a kind of vertigo, they realize that the political unrest in the towns will always be powerless to change and overthrow the colonial regime. So again, he's kind of romanticizing the peasant struggle, which is nice, or the revolutionary that mingles with the peasants, which is nice. But it's a romanticization, so you might feel good about it, but it's still just a romanticization, right? So discussions with the peasants now become a ritual for them. They discover that the rural masses has never ceased to pose the problem of their liberation in terms of violence, of taking back the land from the foreigners, in terms of national struggle and armed revolt. And that's really important. You do want to take the land from the foreigners. But here's the issue. We're talking in a time that's post-colonialism. And because of that, it's not so much that we have land to take from foreigners, although we do have land to take from foreigners still. But it's more so that we have to have land and then organize a powerful economy over it. What we have not done is that we have gotten land and we've organized the same economy that tore us down. And that's the issue. He doesn't say that, but that's the issue. Let's see if Revolutionary Merchant says, there's nothing new under the sun. All colonial ideas are recycled. So these men discover, everything is simple. She said, arms revolt, everything is simple. These men discover a coherent people who survive in a kind of petrified state, but keep intact their moral values and their attachment to the nation. They discover a generous people, prepared to make sacrifices, willing to give all they have, and patient with an indestructible pride. Understandably, the encounter between these militants hounded by the police and these restless, instinctively rebellious masses can produce an explosive mixture of unexpected power. The men from the towns let themselves be guided by the people and at the same time give them military and political training. The people sharpen their weapons. In fact, the training proves short-lived, for the masses, realizing the strength of their own muscles, forces the leaders to accelerate events. The armed struggle is triggered Again, like I said, the romanticization of peasants. This is not to say that you go to Africa and you walk around the villages that everybody in the village is like, hey, yeah, let's go take over the town. That's probably not the case. Maybe it is the case. Who knows? I mean, I haven't really been to the villages like that, but it's doubtful. Either way, so I don't want you to romanticize it, but it also tells you the reality of what you would have to do if push came to shove. And that is that you would have to try to instill armed struggle into the peasants. And actually, this is like textbook Maoism, to be honest. So for those of you who don't know, Mao is the revolutionary leader, in a sense, of China, who went to the peasants to engage in a war against, I can't remember the other guy's name, but a war against this westernized urban element. And he won and kind of, killed most of the urbanites afterward in what was called the Cultural Revolution. But that's what it is. Armed struggle for your liberation is perhaps the most necessary step you have, obviously, like at this point in time, you might not necessarily need to fight for land. You could just buy it. But if not, then yeah, if you can't just get the land and put your own economic system where you want to live, then absolutely, you have to create something. And if creating something means, clearing out the area, you know what I mean? That's what you would have to do. Insurrection disorients the political parties. Their doctrine has always claimed the ineffectiveness of any confrontation, and their very existence serves to condemn any kind of revolt. Certain political parties secretly share the optimism of the colonialists and are glad to be no party to the madness which, it is said, can only end in bloodshed. But the flames have been lit, and like an epidemic, spread like wildfire throughout the country. The tanks and planes do not achieve the success they counted on. Faced with the extent of the damage, colonialism begins to have second thoughts. Voices are raised within the oppressor nation that draw attention to the gravity of the situation. As for the people living in their huts and their dreams, their hearts begin to beat to the new national rhythm, and they softly sing unending hymns to the glory of the fighters. The insurrection has already spread throughout the nation. It is now the turn of the parties to be isolated. Sooner or later, however, the leaders of the insurrection realize the need to extend the insurrection to the towns. Such a realization is not fortuitous. It completes the dialectic which governs the development of an armed struggle for national liberation. Although the rural areas represent endless reserves of popular energy and its groups of armed men maintain a reign of insecurity, colonialism never really doubts the strength of its system. It does not feel in actual danger. The leaders of the insurrection, therefore, decide to move the war into enemy territory, i.e. into the serenity and the grandiloquence of the city. So this is like what I said about with Lenin. Lenin did not just hang around in Russia. He went to another country and came back with the Bolsheviks. What Fanon is saying is that, if you realistically speaking, you go to any city, you go to an African city, whatever, you go to any city, you probably are not going to be able to create an army out of nowhere. He's saying you probably could create an army among the rural peasants if you move around and recruit enough, and then with that army you can march onto the cities and take them over. And understand that you can take over cities. Even like, for instance, there was this example, I guess earlier this year, matter of fact, I don't remember, but Trumpettes, I guess, right? Well, people who were like fans of Trump, like, stormed the Capitol of America. And the reality is that if the government of America, or if people were to just assume the government of America, it could have worked. Like, that's how it works in other parts of the world. Like, you could literally storm the Capitol, take it over, and keep up all the ties and all the diplomatic ties from before. And if you do that, you're basically have taken over the country, because, again, people in the cities or people, whatever, they're not really, like, they really had no say in who was sitting in the office anyway. So if somebody else comes sitting in the office, it's not like they're going to be like, yeah, okay, no, it's not going to go. I mean, they could, but a lot of times they don't, because you're going to end up, with the same force that would have stopped you, whether they were legal or illegal or legitimate or illegitimate. You're still going to be faced up with a Secret Service that says, we'll do whatever we want. You know what I mean? Remember, like the world is run on force. Okay, it is no easy matter for the leadership to foment an insurrection in the cities. We have seen the most of the leaders born or raised in the towns were so hounded by the colonialist police and so generally misunderstood by the rationally minded, overcautious cadres of the political parties that they fled their home environment. Their retreat to the interior was both an escape from repression and a distrust of the old political formations. The national urban relays for these leaders are the nationalists who have made a name for themselves in the political parties, but we have seen that their recent history has little in common with the timorous leaders who spend their time mired in endless discussions on the evils of colonialism. And again, that's what we do. A lot of us are in these discussions of the evils of colonialism, but we're not forming militaries against the colonizer. We're not forming militaries against the colonizer. And there's a large, you look at my website, AfricanBloodSiblings.wordpress.org or .com, and you see one of the things that was on the banner for a long time was an African war without an African army is an African genocide. If you do not have an army, almost nothing really matters. The things that matter are the people. The people that matter are the people with armies. That's how the world is. Just face it. If you don't have like Dessalines was able to liberate Haiti because he had an army, not because he had some good ideas, not because he had some good arguments, because he had an army. And he explains this. He spells it out. Anyway, but moreover, the first overtures made by the men from the Maquis in the direction of their former friends, those they considered to be farthest to the left, confirm their fears and eradicate any desire to renew their acquaintance with them again. In fact, the insurrection, which starts in the rural areas, is introduced into the towns by the fraction of the peasantry blocked at the urban periphery. Those who will not have found a single bone to gnaw into the colonial system. These men, forced off the family land by the growing population in the countryside and by colonial expropriation, circle the towns tirelessly, hoping that one day or another they will be let in. It is among these masses and the people of the shanty towns and in the lumpen proletariat that the insurrection will find its urban spearhead. The lumpen proletariat, this cohort of starving men, divorced from the tribe and clan, constitutes one of the most spontaneously and radically revolutionary forces of a colonized people. In Kenya, during the years preceding the Mau Mau revolts, the British colonial authorities increased their intimidation tactics against the lumpen proletariat. The police and missionaries, and the lumpen proletariat, for those who don't know, it's like the underemployed, the unemployed, the poor, the beggars, the thieves, and so on and so forth, right? So the lumpen proletariat. The police and missionaries coordinated their efforts in the years 1950 to 1951 to respond appropriately to the enormous influx of young Kenyans from the countryside and the forests who, unable to find jobs, took to stealing, debauchery, and alcoholism. Debauchery probably means like prostitution and so forth, and unfortunately, the white people were happy with that, to be honest. Juvenile delinquency, and to this day, by the way, white people, they were saying that you get 12-year-old girls in Kenya. White people from all over the world, Italy, Ireland, so on and so forth. They go down to Kenya to mess with 12-year-old girls, and actually, if you go to these places, because like I said, don't expect the village to be that revolutionary. A lot of these villagers know where their daughters are going. They send their daughters out and count how much money she brings back. It's an awful system. Definitely something definitely something to intervene on. But that's the real world. Juvenile delinquency in the colonized countries stems directly from this lumpen proletariat. Similarly, drastic measures were taken in the Congo from 1957 onward to send back to the interior the young hooligans who were disturbing the peace. Relocation camps were opened and assigned to the evangelical missions under the protection, of course, of the Belgian army. The formation of a lumpen proletariat is a phenomenon which is governed by its own logic, and neither the overzealousness or the missionaries nor decrees from the central authorities can check its growth. However hard it is kicked or stoned, it continues to gnaw at the roots of the tree like a pack of rats. The shanty towns and the consecration of the colonized biological decision to invade the city's enemy citadels at all costs, and if need be, by the most underground channels. The lumpen proletariat constitutes a serious threat to the security of the town and signifies the irresistible right and the irreversible rot and the gangrene eating into the heart of colonial domination. So the pimps, the hooligans, the pimps are like, for those people who don't know what a pimp is, it's like Tariq Nasheed. Anyway, so pimps, the hooligans, the unemployed, and the petty criminals, when approached, give the liberation struggle all they have got, devoting themselves to the cause like valiant workers. The vagrants, these second-class citizens, find their way back to the nation thanks to their decisive militant action. Unchanged in the eyes of colonial society or vis-a-vis the moral standards of the colonizer, they believe the power of the gun or the hand grenade is the only way to enter the cities. These jobless, these species of subhumans redeem themselves in the, and I don't know why he goes into species of subhumans. That's really degrading, but anyway, the jobless, these species of subhumans redeem themselves in their own eyes.
I was about to say, like, what are we talking about now?
Right? Like what? Like, yo, like, dude be going in. Anyway, these jobless, these species of subhumans redeem themselves in their own eyes and before history. The prostitutes too, the domestics are 2,000 francs a month. So domestics would be what we were talking about before, the housemaids and whatever, right? The hopeless cases, all those men and women who fluctuate between madness and suicide are restored to sanity, return to action, and take their vital place in the great march of a nation on the move. The nationalist parties are unable to grasp this new phenomenon that precipitates their disintegration. The outbreak of the insurrection in the town modifies the nature of the struggle. Whereas the mass of the colonialist troops were aimed at the interior, they now surge back to the towns in order to safeguard people and property. The forces of repression are dispersed. Danger lurks in every corner. In the national territory, the entire colony, which enters into a trance, armed groups of peasants watch as the military loosens its grip. The insurrection in the town is an unexpected lifesaver. Yeah, so the leaders of the insurrection, observing the ardor and enthusiasm of the people as they deal decisive blows to the colonialist machine, become increasingly distrustful of traditional politics. You know, you don't want the traditional politics anymore because it's stupid. You're just sitting around talking, oh yeah, I think colonialism is bad. Yeah, I agree, but you know, we got to work on this and then it's like, you just get rid of the system, right? But they don't get rid of the system.
Twitter.
You all right, man? You get some water. All right. So the leaders of the insurrection, observing the ardor and enthusiasm of the. But although what I could say is that Tumblr and Twitter are like that, you know. It's a joke. All right. A decisive blow to the colonialist machine becomes increasingly distrustful of traditional politics. Every victory justifies their hostility towards what they now call hot air, verbiage, bantering, and futile agitation. Like they said, like the brother said, Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, that kind of stuff. Social media. It's just hot air, verbiage, bantering, and futile agitation. I actually had a discussion with somebody the other day about whether or not, you know, Haiti should do some sort of alliance, or not alliance, but some diplomatic, whatever. But the point is that, and I think actually it was brother Organic Paradigm. He put out something else. He said, look, you can't, like, if you're talking about powerless people, nothing's going to happen anyway. You know, like, nothing's going to happen when you're engaging powerless people. That is why one of the most important things for any people to do is to go ahead and get power, because then you can decide whether Haiti's, you know, does this or that. Then you could decide whether the African Union does this or that. Then you could decide whether or not, you know, Rwanda does this or that, or Jamaica does this or that. You can't do that if you don't have power, you know, and you're not even organizing for it. It becomes hot air, verbiage, bantering, and futile agitation. So they feel a hatred for politics. You said what?
Oh, so well, the next question is, how do you gain that power?
How do you gain that power? So obviously, you go ahead and get yourself a copy of the Book of Power. No, I'm joking. But seriously, power is like power. It depends on what you're looking for. But actually, no, I guess Marcus Garvey said, he said it this way. He says, the only protection against injustice in man is power, physical, financial, and scientific. You know, so he gives you three examples of power. There's the physical power, which is, you know, force, might makes right. You know, that could be armies, that could be assassins, that could be whatever, right?
Bench press,
squats, yeah, that too, I guess. But that's more, yeah. But anyway, physical, financial being obviously wealth, capital. Yeah. You know, if you're investing. And if you
land ownership as well.
Exactly. Land ownership, capital, you put capital inside. Like the people who were sitting down in the council leading Haiti, they all had capital behind them. Obviously. They all were willing to put some money where their mouth was. there's a big difference. The Democrats, for instance, might have sometimes they have tables where they have events or dinners where it's like $2,000 a plate of food. Now the food is not popping. The point is that you're now sitting down with potentially the future leadership of the country. But that's because you have financial power. You have enough financial power that you could spend $2,000 on food.
Some broccoli and some
some broccoli and bullshit. You know what I mean? Like when you that right there is just a symbol. And then of course there are gonna be black people who are like, oh, you see how the Democrats are elitists and the Democrats are not gonna allow us to sit down and talk to us. But what if I had a problem? It's like nobody cares. You got a problem, but you don't have the capital.
None of these universal language for them.
I mean, look, it's the reality is that if I'm running for office, right? I don't need to hear from you. I mean, if I'm running for office, it don't matter what conversations we have. You understand? If I don't win, how am I gonna win? I'm gonna win if you put your money where your mouth is. Or enough people put their money where their mouth is, where I'm on every single show. I have a good PR. I have commercials, ads. All that costs money.
And just traveling to different speaking events.
Exactly. I'm open up to your and who hosts speaking events? Like for instance, I mean, not to get on you, brother, but let's say this. Like, can you host a speaking event? Like, do you have any sort of institution to host a speaking event? I mean, of course, it's a rhetorical question. You should probably say no. But the point is,
institution, like what?
Like somewhere to host a speaking event. Yeah. All right. I'll say it this way.
I can get that one.
No. Do you have one?
Oh, like
not does somebody else have one that you could have access to?
Like a community center or something. No.
Yeah. Do you have an auditorium that is frequented by a group of people? No, but somebody does. Right?
Sure.
Like when you said you could get one. That means that there's an institution somewhere where somebody actually has the say as to who can show up there. And you could probably, whatever, rub shoulders with them, and they'd be like, sure, I'll give you an opportunity, right? But they have it.
Yeah.
That's the person that you want on the table. Not you because you could ask a friend. No, that person who could, who's the friend you were gonna ask. And so that person helps me get elected and reelected and reelected and reelected, right? That's the person that
and then
I make promises to.
You rub their back.
Exactly. I make promises to that person. You know what I mean? I don't make promises. I mean,
updates or renovations for this stadium you got or whatever.
Exactly. You see what I'm saying? That's how the world works. It's not, and that's financial power. So physical, financial, and scientific. Scientific power is probably technology and all that other stuff. It's
also technology. Yeah. I was curious what the scientific was.
Yeah, it could be like, for instance, like we said, right now there's vaccines. You have a vaccine, you have more influence. You have this, you have you have an internet. Whatever. Like you have technology or scientific progress. You have that. Hold on a second. Give me 2 seconds. I gotta get this kid. Hold on a second. Yeah, so those are the things. Now, I do want to say that, what I try to do is I try to outline how you would build power. Power, I would say one of the first steps is obviously land. Not to say that physical, financial, and scientific all have to do with land, but they kind of do. But on top of that land, you would also then, develop the mind of the people on the land. you know. So build a community that has a sharp mind or inventive and productive mind, and have a community that you're really feeding and helping and developing, and that right there is going to be the kind of power, positive power, that we need in Africa, you know. But that's like, like I said, I do write about that in my literature, but that's really like, well, that's like core to it, And every people do this. They develop their community, develop their people. They organize their people, and when you have your people that are organized, when you have people like you use human capital effectively, it does translate into power in the human community, It does translate to power in the human community. Obviously, scientific would be also, like I said, technology. Like you have a better gun, that's power. You know what I mean? Of course, you might say that's physical power again, but
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, but it doesn't just have to be a gun. It could be like you develop a virus. You know what I mean? Right? Hashtag conspiracy theories, right? But anyway.
Well, I'm curious during Garvey's time how what was the scientific power at that time? Was it maybe genetics? I know eugenics was popular during that period.
Well, again, this is World War I, World War II. They developed like World War II was. Like they legit had mustard gas and they had like concentration camps and shit.
We're just as weak as we were 1,000 years ago, and the enemy is stronger. I was thinking about
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, 1,000 years ago, right? We're just as weak as we were then. We took an L to them then. What do you mean?
Well, 1,000 years has been pretty strong though, but I know what you're saying.
Right. The point is 500 years ago,
like 100 years ago,
300 years, 1,000 years ago, was just the number, But the point is we're just as weak. We're just as weak in relative,
we're weaker
in relation to the enemy. Yeah, exactly. To be honest, we're actually weaker because when time goes by and the enemy gets stronger, you're not where you.
Well, we had armies back then. We don't have armies now, so he's talking about black people. He's not talking about people in general. Yeah, so black people used to have armies once upon a time, and now we don't. So technically, we'd be weaker than we were before.
And the enemy has progressed so much quicker.
Have you seen Black Twitter?
Hilarious.
I mean, we could cancel better, I guess. like we could definitely cancel better. We could definitely hit that block button or whatever. But or that whatever. But yeah, no. Technically, like, because I understand the Songhai Empire had I think it was like 200,000 like cavalry or something like that, which is pretty impressive. You can't really do much against 200,000 cavalry today. I mean, of course, you could like gun them down if you had that kind of capacity. But what do you mean? What? I mean, if you had like a machine gun or something.
I'm gonna hear you out.
It's not as no, we're not as potent. But as he says, white people now have drones and stealth ships and stealth bombers and it's just that was 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. So and that's like today they probably have they don't let you know per se, but they're not worried about you. You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah. So I'm guessing that's PC. So peace, PC. How you doing?
How you doing, man? How you doing?
All right. Anyway, so those are the three kinds of power that Gary was outlining, and I would say, there's ways to get it, but mainly you want to develop land, and like I said, obviously build up an army, build up a community, build up a people, and that is like a process that we really have to investigate on our own. I mean, investigate. So they feel a hatred of politics and demagoguery, hence the initial phase of the cult to spontaneity is triumphant. So let's continue. The rash of revolts which break out in the interior testify to the nation's substantial presence. The substantial presence in every quarter. Every colonized subject in arms represents a piece of the nation on the move. These revolts jeopardize the colonial regime, force it to mobilize its troops by dispersing them, and threatens to suffocate them at any moment. They are governed by a simple doctrine. The nation must be made to exist. There's no program, no discourse. There are no resolutions, no factions. The problem is clear-cut. The foreigners must leave. Let us build a common front against the oppressor, and let us reinforce it with armed struggle. So again, this has its pros and cons. Obviously, it's more pros than cons. Get rid of the foreigner. The con, however, is that unfortunately, after the foreigner is gone, if you don't have a direction, anybody can take that direction. Anybody can take what's going on. And actually, I think the best example I can think of at the moment, or one of the best examples to illustrate this, is what was called like the Arab Youth Spring, I think. But there's like some country in the Arab world where there was this mass protest. I'm guessing against America.
I want to say it was Egypt. Locally.
Yeah. So yeah, some country where
Arab Spring.
There was some protest, like social media, Twitter, Tumblr. They were using it effectively, and they made this mass protest, and they were like trying to get rid of, let's say, the American presence or something. But it was really effective, and then like taking on to this momentum, which is something that you can do, which is one of the most important things you want to understand in life, is that you have to learn when to take advantage of an opportunity. Yeah, take advantage of opportunity. So there was another faction that
iron is hot. Yeah.
Exactly, that was another faction that wasn't on the social media liberal stuff, and it was like this like conservative left, like extremist religious group, right? Extremist religious circle. And so while you have these youth who are kind of westernized, are going against this leader or whatever, and they're westernized and they want to do like democracy and Western blah, 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 right? And in fact, that's what it was. It was like they were rebelling against the dictator there. So it wasn't necessarily an American presence. It was just like, they probably might have been like the pro-American element, right? This religious element comes in and like takes advantage of the situation, takes advantage of the uprising, and shows up, and then they establish their religious regime in this country. You get what I'm saying? So as to say that even though the I guess maybe it was America was successful in instigating a revolt against the leader or whatever, even though that happened, it backfired, and it made it so that it went towards it went towards the religious right, in a sense. That in itself is like one of the gambles you take, and one of the reasons why you want to organize and be clear with your people what you're organizing towards. Obviously the main objective is get rid of the foreigners, but get rid of the foreigners for what?
After that case.
Exactly. Get rid of the foreigners for what? Because if you could get rid of the foreigners, because see, both sides wanted to get rid of the leader at hand, right? Both sides wanted to get rid of the leader in hand, but the other side, but like, so you have this temporary alliance or this temporary working together, but whatever it was, but you take this opportunity and then you're not being mindful of the other force in power, the other force that will make it worse, and that's
a lack of foresight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but you had to do what you had to do, but at the same time, remember that the struggle is very multi-layered. And there are many variables at hand. It's not going to be simple. You get rid of this white boy, and then all of a sudden, like for instance, like you said, what happens inside of Nigeria is that you get rid of this British, you get rid of the British, and then you have this Fulani supremacy. Is that what you wanted? Now, some people, like I said, I know some people who are more versed in this subject, and they are saying that some of the Fulani are looking to do, I said, Ibn Danfodio, some Danfodio person, but they're saying this guy was trying to, like before the British showed up, he was trying to like conquer the rest of the Niger Delta or whatever. It's just an area of Nigeria. He was just kind of conquer the rest of them and put them under some jihadist whatever. And then so now you get this liberation, and you have these same elements, these same people it's like some people among them might still want to establish whatever their ancestor was trying to set out to do. So you have this liberation of your country, and then it comes back to, the people who were trying to conquer me, who were at war before, now they have all the nation's resources and the nation's armies and their nation's policing force at their disposal. I'm in more trouble. Now, That's not to say you don't get rid of the British, but what it tells you is that when you're trying to mobilize and organize against the British, you have to be better versed, and you have to understand what's at stake, and understand what you want, and understand what the other factions want, what the other people want. This happened in actually Haiti as well. In Haiti, there were multiple factions fighting the French, right? There were the Spanish fighting the French. There were the British fighting the French. There were the black African enslaved fighting the French, and then they were the mulatto middle class fighting the French, right? You have, so what made Haiti successful partially was that the blacks and the mulattoes worked together. But after the revolution, the mulattoes then got more power, with the exception of Dessalines, who had the most power. And then this mulatto faction still was allowed to do whatever they wanted, and they eventually killed Dessalines. And being mulattoes are the particular mulattoes that were, I call them Eurasianists, or European-centered mulattoes. They opted for France to return, in a sense, and paid them a debt that Haiti didn't finish paying until recently. But that is what happens when you get together with multiple factions, or there are multiple factions at play. You have to be very solid. You have to understand what's at stake, what is going on. The mulattoes were a minority population. They ended up being the majority of the government after the revolution of Haiti. And this caused its problems, because if you're the majority of the government who is not agreeing with Dessalines, right? And eventually they killed Dessalines, right? There is a problem. Now, what was Dessalines supposed to do? They helped him win this revolution. They helped him win this war. Was he supposed to turn on them later? Who knows? But the reality is that not turning on them caused him his life and caused Haiti its prosperity to this day. So, I want people to just sit back and, obviously read the literature surrounding that. Again, I provide it. But although you could also look at Irritated Genie and Black Jacobins. Those are two of the best books on Haitian Revolution. But outside of that, obviously other literature as well. But the thing is that you have to, this is real life. This is real war. This is not the, if you do everything right, if you're a good person, or if you blah 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 or whatever. It's not that. It's complicated. So again, like I said, there's pros and cons. Obviously, common front, fight against the oppressor. Foreigner must leave. But then after, what happens? And here's an example, a modern example. Let's go to South Africa. South Africa, it's black first, land first, right? BLF, I think, yeah, black land first, whatever, right? Let's say you say we're going to take the land from the whites, no compensation. Just take the land back, right? And you give it to whom? In fact, I think it was Zimbabwe. Mugabe, I believe it was Mugabe's in Zimbabwe, right? Mugabe gives the land to his party members. They're not farmers. You understand? So Zimbabwe ends up having starvation and hunger problems. This is what you have to calculate, because on the one hand, obviously, you give them to your party members, right? You give the land to your party members. You don't give it to your party opposition. You don't give it to randos, right? However, if they're not farmers, if they're not farming, if they're not using it productively, if they're not using it optimally, then what? And then, of course, we saw videos of when the white people came back and got the land, they were being celebrated, and we were like, what kind of coon stuff is that? Well, one of the things is that if you're not administering the land properly yourself, which unfortunately it probably in certain circumstances they weren't, you do celebrate getting food again. Now, I wouldn't personally celebrate it. I wouldn't personally, well, white people, I'm trying to develop those skills myself. I don't think agriculture is that complicated, so I'm not going to say
it's not. Bro, we've been doing agriculture for thousands of years.
But that's it. It's like you were doing it for thousands of years, but you never did it. You know what I mean? Like you personally never did it. Your my ancestors, might have grown something somewhere, but I personally never did. You know what I mean?
Okay, I know, but you trying to tell me the nation of millions, you can't find a good.
That's the thing. You could find it, but it depends on who you gave it to. So if you gave it to, if you give me Not to say, now obviously I could do it, right? But I'm just saying, let's say I couldn't, right? But you give, because remember, like, don't look at you or me as the example of the average. You know,
Okay, sure.
like we're technically highly educated. You know what I mean? Or at least you are, right? But anyway,
Yeah, I don't know about you.
he's like,
Go ahead.
wait, what'd you say? What'd you say?
I said, I don't know about you. Go ahead.
All right, yeah. That's okay. Anyway, but like what I'm saying is that like you highly educated, you could sort of stuff, but you're talking about it's possible that you like let's say you do this revolution. You do this revolution, you're fighting on the front lines with somebody who just came from the backwoods, you know? And they did a good job. They shot a couple of heads. They did some bodies. They washed your back. You know, you want to reward them with something. You're like, hey, when we get free, we're getting land. So you give them a huge tract of land because they washed your back and all that stuff. But let's say they were illiterate. You know, let's say they were illiterate. Let's say they were what was it? One of those what do you call when you like really like physical like physicality? You know what I mean? Like you know,
Aggressive.
not aggressive, but not Trump. No, like no physicality, like sexual lust. You know, what's it called? All right, whatever. But like, oh my gosh, all right, whatever. Not a freak. All right, whatever. There's a better word. A hedonist. Like, let's say you're hedonistic, right? Or even like, I'll say it this way. Matter of fact, actually, I had a friend who was like. No, I knew somebody whose parent was a part of some revolutionary movement, right? Some revolutionary movement that like, or their family was a part of the revolutionary movement. They then got land because they were a part of the victoring party from like the nation being liberated, right?
Sure.
And the thing is though that they themselves was a habitual drunk. You understand? But like their siblings and them, like they were a part of the siblings and their, so they had wealth tied to a large amount of land, a large amount of animals, but they themselves didn't really manage it well. So like that's a reality. Like the realism is that sure, and this is one of the issues with regards to like I say power is that you know there's power in character. You know there's power in character development and power in character. So
maybe
you could have
nepotism in a way.
Yeah, well that's what it. But the thing is that again, like you have to understand that when somebody helps you do something, you often do compensate them well.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
I understand that.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. So, but it becomes complicated when you have these finite resources. So it might be sure you have 1,000 people. You have so many people better qualified to do something, but then how many of them are loyal to you? You get what I'm saying? Sure. How many of them are not loyal to your enemy? How many of them are not trying to kill or sabotage you or the nation? That's the question. So it really is kind of like I said. It's a real situation. It's a human situation. It's not that simple. You know. Oh well. You know. Well, after we get this land liberated, we're just gonna find the good farmers. What if the good farmers are all like F? You know, F Machiavelli. You know. Or Tupac sucks, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like,
the guillotine.
You know what I'm saying? Like, shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what happens, you know? I mean, nobody, not for no Tupac sucks thing, but, you know, that's what happens. Like, they're like, oh, Mugabe's a crook and blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, or Mugabe's a part of another political party, you know? Like, let's say, like, let's go to the Fulani case, right? You know, or let's go to the Nigeria case, right? Always Nigeria. All right. No, but Nigeria's a nice, because I had converse with people. Talking about Nigeria. Yeah. Like, who are the advisors of Buhari? Fulani people. He's not going to have. Now, are there better qualified? Are there better qualified advisors among the Igbo and the Yoruba and the other groups? Absolutely. Like, absolutely. Like, all without a doubt, the Fulani area is like the least educated in Africa. But I mean, not in Africa, in Nigeria. Yeah, like whatever, right? The least educated. But at the same time, if you are a Fulani nationalist, right, are you going to surround yourself with Igbos and Yoruba, particularly if you have to win an election, right? Are you going to surround yourself with Igbo and Yoruba, or are you going to surround yourself with Fulani? Now, if you choose to do the wrong thing, or politics is that it's either right. It's not absolutely right and not absolutely wrong. It's like a gray area. You know,
you get the most support for whatever you try.
Exactly, because you put in, and like again, like you might have a particularly important, like I said about the person who could host the thing. You might have a particularly important Fulani who's like, yeah, if you put my son in office or you put my son in your camp or whatever, then I'll keep you up. I'll keep you in good favors with the Fulani at large. Because remember, yeah, you said you what?
I won't burn your book.
Exactly. I mean, like let's, because again, when Buhari said that nobody else voted for him, so it was very sectarian, this election, right? And so the Igbo all voted for an Igbo candidate. And not all of them, not all, but enough.
But like the
predominantly
is clear.
Yeah, they said what?
So the affiliation is clear.
Yeah, the Yoruba voted for the Yoruba, and the Igbo and the Fulani voted for the Fulani. So now he, being put in place by the Fulani, has to put the Fulani into his circle, and so then he's not going to have this. You said what?
I said because that's his base.
That's his base. That's his not. That's what you're like. Not to say that's what you're supposed to do, but like I said, the Republican Party is a good example of that kind of thing where like that's what they do. It's like, do they put like what judge do they put into this judge vacancy? They put in
right-wing or Republican.
Or right-wing or Republican. Like would some Democrat judges be better? Absolutely. But does that mean that they use them? No. You have to be.
Give them though. You'll be the most dumbest, but like they're all in droves supporting just because of that affiliation.
That's what you do. But that exactly if he had done what would have been better, like not get this illiterate dumbass and get whatever. If he had done that, I mean, he lost the election anyway, but he would have lost the election worse. He would have been condemned by the Republican media apparatus. So it's the same with this Buhari guy. If he does whatever, like they could kill him. They're not going to be like, oh, you got Fulani, or you got Yoruba, and you got Nigeria, and you're working with Ghana. You're not working with Niger. You're working with, you're working with historically other areas. You're not working with historical Fulani areas. You're doing all this, and the economy is looking better, sure, but we're no longer, the center. But we put you up because you were Fulani. Yeah, you're gone. That's what happened to the Haitian president. Matter of fact,
in your books.
Yeah, exactly, right? Shit. These books already was gone. They didn't read them anyway. You know what I'm saying? they just realized we didn't burn this and it said Mugabe. You're Buhari. My fault, Can't read. I didn't know. I thought, anyway, you're gonna get me in trouble, man. I'm trying to go to Nigeria. I don't know about you, but I'm trying to visit.
If they can't even read, you good. They don't know internet.
No, actually, they had a video of this guy. He was kind of silly though, but he did like talking bad about the Islamic prophet or whatever.
In front of him?
If on YouTube, on Twitter or Facebook or something. On Facebook, they were talking about killing him, man. They were like, we gonna kill this dude. And of course this dude looking disheveled. I thought he was me, man. I'm like, am I sleep talking? No, he looking disheveled. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what the fuck? Am I in trouble? Like shit. You know what I'm saying? I've been walking around Nigeria. They're gonna be talking about, I thought we killed you. I'm like, shit. You know what I'm saying? Nah, I just messed it. All right. So, yeah, you messed up, man.
Who's this?
Who's what?
In the chat.
Oh, I don't know. It looks like what is that symbol?
Let me find out. Fulani jumped in here.
I told you, man. Yeah, you got scared. Peace symbolism. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce that. You know how to pronounce that? Like, what is that? It doesn't look like a.
What it is.
Yeah, exactly. I want to say a semicolon, but I hope it's not. Yeah. All right. Anyway. All right. So, as long as colonialism remains in a state of anxiety. Hey, hold on a second. Let me see something. I don't remember that sign being here. Did they just join? No. Okay. All right. Back to what we were talking about. As long as colonialism remains in a state of anxiety, the national cause advances and becomes the cause of each and every one. The struggle for
verify. Not to interrupt.
Yeah. The struggle for liberation. Yeah. All right. Are they gonna say anything? They're not saying anything, so it's all good. The struggle for liberation takes shape and already involves the entire country. During this period, spontaneity rules. Initiatives rest with the local area. On every hilltop, a government in miniature is formed and assumes power. In the valleys and in the forests, in the jungle and in the villages, everywhere, one encounters a national authority. The action of each and every one substantiates the nation and undertakes to ensure its triumph locally. We are dealing with a strategy of immediacy, which is both all-embracing and radical. The objective, the program of every spontaneously formed group is liberation at a local level. If the nation is present everywhere, it must then be here. One step further, and it is present only here. Tactics and strategy merge. The art of politics is quite simply transformed into the art of war. The militant becomes the fighter. To wage war and to engage in politics are one and the same thing. So again, that's what it is. Like, it's going to take everybody. Like after liberation, people, or for the liberation struggle, like, you have to form military or are fighting against whatever it is that you want removed. You know, and again, like I said, there's going to be this loyalty with the people who fought versus the people who were on the sidelines. In fact, actually, that's what happened in America. I actually document that as well. And it's Maurice Bishop talks about it. But a lot of us do not know or do not remember this for some reason. But during the American Revolution, right? Because it was a revolution, right, against a colonial force, and they used violence to decolonize America and, you know, keep it, you know, kind of the same. But what happened was like 30-something% were for independence. 30-something% were what they call loyalists or redcoats, or loyalists who were basically, you know, for the British to keep in power. And then 30% were also like ambivalent. They took neither part, right? After the revolution, if you were one of those people who thought the British should stay in power, you didn't even have the right to vote. You know, all of your land and property was confiscated, and you were pretty much stripped of your authority. You know, your abilities. You're in this new nation. You see what I'm saying? So and you know, Maurice Bishop pointed this out because a lot of us don't remember this, right? But he pointed this out to say that, you know, America, when they criticize these new African governments, when they were a new government, they also suppressed those people who were the opposition to their liberation, to their freedom. But it also tells you as well that, and of course, the people who got the land and the property and all that kind of stuff from these British or whomever, from the people who were pro-British, they got the power, they got the land, they got the so on and so forth. So that's what you see. Even when I told you Mugabe gives this land to his party, or Buhari gives his land to the Fulani, you know, he gives this opportunity, this expansion, this he looks the other way for the Fulani. Why? Because that's the party that is supporting him in power, you know. And again, you know, going back to the decolonization effort, though, this liberation effort, that's what happens if you were active. And this is why I advise us to be active in the struggle for Africa, because that's where we're going to get the rewards from the end. You know, if Africa liberates itself without us, right, it doesn't need to give us anything.
Who was you?
What do you mean, who's you? Oh, that's what they're gonna say. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, like, where were you when we were? You know, like that's what it is. Oftentimes, you know, that's what it is. Oftentimes, I mean, obviously, you know, they could, but they don't have to. And it's,
you want to shoot with me in the gym?
Exactly. That's what happens when you know, somebody gets big. You know, when they were like there was somebody who joins the NBA and you're like, hey man, you know, why don't you just spot me some? It's like, me? Yeah, like what? Like, I remember you not helping me out. You know what I mean?
Remember, we were third period.
yeah, real talk though. Like what is that? Like, you know damn well I don't remember you. I mean, like, if I remember you, that's fine, but I'm not gonna give you no money. I ain't give you money before. You know what I'm saying? Like, why would I suddenly just give you money? Like, what? Anyway, the dispossessed population used to living in a narrow cycle of conflict and rivalry, soundly sets about cleansing and purifying the local face of the nation. In a state of genuine collective ecstasy, rival families decide to wipe the slate clean and forget the past. Reconciliations abound. Deep buried traditional hatreds are dug up, the better to root them out. Faith in the nation furthers political consciousness. National unity begins with the unity of the group, the settling of old scores, and the elimination once and for all of all resentment. Those indigenous elements who have dishonored the country by their activities and their complicity with their occupier are also included in the cleansing process. You see what I'm saying? I just said this. So that's what happened in America. Like, people don't realize, people forget, but that's what happened in America. You know? What happened in America was after the revolution, you know, there were British sympathizers. There were people who were like, why are we fighting the British? You know, that's our family. That's our people. That's, you know, that's like, we the same people. Why are we fighting them? Or they're running the colony good and all that, blah, blah, blah. After that, they were chased, cut, you know, killed, all that kind of stuff. Dispossessed of land, all that kind of stuff. And so it does behoove. Now, see, what happened in America is America lucked out with African Americans who were good at farming. You know what I mean? But like, if you're in Africa and the people who were like, yeah, let's keep the colonial system going, or I want to be a rival party or whatever, you're not giving them land. Like, Buhari is not going to empower Igbo or Yoruba people necessarily.
That's,
you know, if he can empower Fulani people, right? Because if you're empowering your opposition, right, you are accelerating your downfall. You know, that's how it is in real life. If you're empowering your opposition, because what happened was that after the Americans liberated themselves, in a sense, right, the British did come back and burn down their capital. You know, like, the British did come back. They had to fight them again. But it would have been so different if the wealthy people and the well-to-do people who were British sympathizers still had power in America. Because it wouldn't have just been that the British came back and burned down. It would have just been that America would still be a colony. You understand? So it's one of those important things to do. So I'll read it again. The dispossessed population used to living in a narrow cycle of conflict and rivalry solemnly sets again about cleansing and purifying the local face of the nation. In a state of genuine collective ecstasy, rival families decide to wipe the state clean and forget the past. So, you know, you forget your past and you say, yeah, we're a nation. You know, we all worked together. We all fought together, right? Reconciliations abound. Deep buried traditional hatreds are dug up, and the better to root them out. Occasionally, faith in the nation furthers political consciousness. National unity begins. So this is the optimistic thing, you know, where the Fulani, the Igbo, and the Yoruba kind of all sit together and be like, you know what, let's not even hate each other, right? But again, you know, it's difficult. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's difficult because they have this religious conflict, and anything could exacerbate, because that's happened in Cameroon. You know, you have this Anglophone and Francophone conflict. You know, one side speaks English, one side speaks French, and they're just fighting each other, killing each other. And, you know, fighting is not just like,
you said Cameroon, right?
You said it's still Cameroon?
No, I said you said Cameroon. I didn't.
Yeah, Cameroon.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah. So it's like it's not just like it's like little, like, I saw a video, right, where these two women with children on their backs are marched into like some rubble area, told to go on their knees, and the children still on their backs. They are gunned down actively, you know, by these soldiers.
In Cameroon?
Yeah. You know, and I think it was Cameroon. It could have been somewhere else, but it's the same, you know. But I think it was Cameroon. Yeah. But like, and they're just gunned down. And this whole village is like massacred. But the children, the babies, weren't removed from the back, so the babies were shot there as well. And it's just, you know, you see the little girl, you know, the little baby, laying on their mother's back, you know, bundled up, you know, feeling secure and snug, unaware of the world. And the soldiers just gun the kid and the mother down. You know, so again, you know, real life is not, real life is harsh.
It's not sweet.
It's not sweet. It's, you know, these are the things that people end up in. Like, that's how Lumumba died. You know, the
Yeah,
woman was
but
brought
tragically,
somewhere.
just horribly. Yeah.
Yeah, the woman was brought somewhere. You know, set down and gunned and then chopped up, body chopped up by
And
these
then
white
put
boys.
into acid or something like that.
Yeah, like, you know, you don't know. Even among us, you don't know. We could end up this way. You know,
Yeah.
that's what. But that's what
It's
it.
a reality.
That's the world you're up against. You know, and I don't want people to think that it isn't. You know, I don't want you to be surprised that, you know, like you're not safe because you got a baby on your back. You know, there are some, like, I try not to watch this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've seen some stuff. You know, so. Anyway, so deep buried traditional hatreds are dug up, the better to root them out. Faith in the nation furthers political consciousness. National unity begins with the unity of the group, the settling of all scores, and the elimination, once and for all, of all any resentment. Those indigenous elements who have dishonored the country by their activities and their complicity with the occupiers are also included in the cleansing process. Traitors and mercenaries, however, are judged and punished. On their continuing road to self-discovery, the people legislate and claim their sovereignty. Every component roused from its colonial slumber lives at boiling point. The villages witness a permanent display of spectacular generosity and disarming kindness and an unquestioned determination to die for the cause. All of this is reminiscent of a religious brotherhood, a church, a mystical doctrine. No part of the indigenous population can remain indifferent to this new rhythm which drives the nation. Emissaries are dispatched to the neighboring tribes. They represent the insurrection's first liaison system and introduce the rhythm and movement of the revolution to the region still mired in immobility. Tribes well known for their stubborn rivalry disarm in rejoicing and tears and pledge their help and support. In this atmosphere of brotherly solidarity and armed struggle, men link arms with their former enemies. The national circle widens and every new ambush signals the entry of a new tribe. Every village becomes a free agent and a relay point. Solidarity among tribes, among villages, and at the national level is first discernible in the growing number of blows dealt to the enemy. Every new group, every new volley of cannon fire signals that everybody is hunting the enemy. Everybody is taking a stand, and that's what you really want. Everybody to take a stand, and that's actually page 84. So that's where I would conclude. But you know, he's documenting how, like, what a revolution looks like on the positive note, you know, not necessarily on the bloody note and, you know, all that, like all the torture that the Kenyans went through via the concentration camps that the British set up. But, you know, like they put, I think, mud in somebody, like people's mouths and then stomp their heads. You know, they tie you up, put mud in your mouth until you can't breathe, I suppose, and then they stomp on your head. This is the brutality that we're up against, and the brutality is not just white people against black people. You know, brutality of black people against black people is going to be a thing. You know, that's why I say you have to navigate intelligently, as well as you can't necessarily give out all your moves. You know, you give out all your moves, and they'll be waiting for you. You know, if I tell you if I tell everybody, hey, look, I'm going to be at you know, Miller Hotel or whatever, right? If I piss off the wrong person, if I piss off enough people or whatever, or even just one person I pissed off, they're gonna be waiting for me at Miller Hotel, you know, or their troop is gonna be waiting for me at Miller Hotel, you know. That's just the reality of the world, you know. He's like a pedophile or something, but he was like killed in prison or whatever, and then nobody seemed to know how, but the judge that was going against him, her husband and child were shot in their home because somebody sent an assassin. Like, assassins are a real thing. It's you know, you might feel a little bit of security living in the West, where they kind of try to limit assassinations, or at least you're not involved in the politics so deeply that they are sending assassins towards you. But assassins are a real profession that's been going on for thousands of years. And it behooves you to not understand that as we approach this kind of future that threatens the way of exploitation for African people, exploitation of African people, and is to infuse a new future for Africans. That we're going to come across an opposition that doesn't necessarily have the same, that doesn't necessarily look at the sanctity of our bodies and our safety and our so on and so forth as well as we would like. You know, they wouldn't mind putting mud in your mouth and stomping on you, you know. So anyways, I see it's Oracle Fish. They changed their name. But other than that, thank you everybody for listening. And hopefully I'll hear from you another day. But of course, I'll log out on this podcast, tell you all, Shem Hotep. And I'm going to sign off before this brother says something silly. Okay. Anyway.